I just want to take a moment to, really acknowledge the significance, as so many have pointed out today, of us being in this room right now on this day. This is the first time in American history that an event on cannabis policy has been held in the Capitol building on 4/20. So give it up for yourselves for being here, for being a part of history. And on that note, I don't have to do too much improv because it looks like our next speaker has arrived. So in order to introduce our next speaker, I want to bring up Jason Ortiz of the Students for Sensible Drug Policy and Maritza Perez Medina of the Drug Policy Alliance.
Hello, National Cannabis Festival. Yes, give it up for getting together. Spending 420, changing laws. That's how we celebrate in the drug policy movement. That's right. And my name is Jason Ortiz. I'm the Executive Director of Students for Sensible Drug Policy. And it is my honor to stand here today with mi hermana en la lucha, Maritza Perez Medina, to welcome one of our nation's most impactful public servants, and the senator representing the great state of New York, of which we have many SSD peers in attendance. Give it up for SSDP in New York. Yeah, there they are. Students for Sensible Drug Policy is the nation's largest grassroots youth-led drug policy organization, which empowers young people to change the drug laws in their communities to be more grounded in science, reason, and compassion. Today, our young leaders have been scouring the halls of Congress, creating new alliances with forward-thinking public officials to build a more sensible drug policy. We were advocating for the release of cannabis prisoners, ensuring that we adopt life-saving psychedelic treatments, and ensure that all college campuses have access to harm reduction services so that we can prevent youth overdose and make all of our communities safer. And there is no one more forward-thinking, more able to bring together new alliances than our honored guest here today. And there is no organization we are more proud to partner with than the Drug Policy Alliance. DPA, and specifically Maritza Perez Medina, has led the charge on ensuring our policies are always grounded in justice for our most impacted communities. I've had the honor of working with her as a member of the Marijuana Justice Coalition, where the nation's most influential drug policy organizations fight to keep our national conversation laser beam focused on ensuring social justice is the top priority for our movement, our Congress, and our nation. Welcome, Maritza.
Jason. Thank you for your kind words and also for your leadership in this space. We love SSTP. While the Drug Policy Alliance does have a national presence, we have a long history of advocacy, reform, and resistance in New York, where we are headquartered. Thankfully, we are fortunate to have a strong New York delegation in Congress that supports our work and also believes that the war on drugs has failed our communities and that change is long overdue. Majority Leader Schumer has been one of these allies, particularly on marijuana reform. Undoubtedly, the Majority Leader has helped shift the conversation in Congress and set a new bar, one where marijuana reform legislation will not succeed unless it accounts for the historical harms endured by marginalized communities. This is evident in the historic introduction of the Cannabis Administration and Opportunity Act, a bill that the Majority Leader introduced last year alongside Senators Wyden and Booker. This legislation builds off of the House-passed MORE Act and includes a more marijuana-specific regulatory framework, as well as more robust criminal justice and immigration provisions. But before the MORE Act was even introduced in the Senate, Majority Leader Schumer introduced the first marijuana descheduling bill in the upper chamber containing funding for state-level expungements with his Marijuana Freedom and Opportunity Act back in 2019. Further, Majority Leader Schumer has been a tremendous advocate in ensuring the Safe Banking Act is improved to safeguard the inclusion of equity license holders, small businesses, and minority-owned marijuana businesses in regulated marijuana markets. We thank Majority Leader Schumer for his tireless work and advocacy on behalf of our communities. And in recognition of his advocacy and leadership, it is my honor to present Majority Leader Schumer with the Changemaker Award. Please help me welcome Majority Leader Schumer to the stage.
Thank you very, very much. I'm honored, very honored, to receive this award. Thank you. Okay, thank you. So, hello to everyone here. Happy 420. What a day. Where are my New Yorkers? Raise your hands. All right, New York is in the house. Now, I was going to say, let me hear you make some noise, but you did. You're New Yorkers. You didn't have to be told to make noise. It's so good to be here. Now, what an amazing sight I see in front of me. Activists, entrepreneurs, policymakers, Democrats, Republicans, all sitting together in one room here in the U.S. Capitol, pushing for federal cannabis reform. I want to thank Caroline Phillips, the founder and executive producer of the National Cannabis Festival and the National Cannabis Policy Summit. And thank you to Justin Streekel, who organized today's event and invited me, where'd he go? Well, he's back there somewhere, and invited me to speak to you this afternoon. I also want to thank my colleagues from both the House and Senate who participated in this summit. A particular shout out to Earl Blumenauer, who really has led the charge on this issue long before it was popular, because he knew it was the right thing to do. What a great guy Earl is. Maybe I'll start wearing a bow tie, who knows? And of course, our advocates, especially the leadership of the Marijuana Justice Coalition and the Cannabis Freedom Alliance. And of course, I want to thank all of you for being here. Welcome to the Capitol. We're happy to have you here in your house. This is your house. I hope today's summit has proved fruitful and productive. Now, thank you all so much for the honor of this year's Changemaker Award. I am proud to be the first majority leader ever to say that it's time to end the federal prohibition on cannabis. And it's time to bring justice to so many Americans whose lives have been ruined by the war on drugs. To receive this recognition from you is an honor, one I accept with a promise to keep fighting until federal cannabis reform is the law of the land. I believe deep in my bones that we will get there one day soon. Because there is no stopping this movement. When social activists and entrepreneurs and veterans groups and conservatives and liberals are all able to come together on one issue, it's a sure sign the momentum is real. But look, Congress has a lot of work to do to catch up with the rest of the country. Congress is behind the rest of the country on this issue. Few issues have evolved as rapidly as the public's view on cannabis 20 years ago. Less than a third of Americans believed that marijuana should be legalized. But today, decriminalization is the overwhelming consensus from New York City all the way to Los Angeles, California, from Portland, Maine, all the way, Earl, to Portland, Oregon. Now, there's a saying that states are the best laboratories for democracy. Well, cannabis legislation proves just that. Because cannabis legislation has proven immensely successful at the state level. It gives entrepreneurs a chance to pursue their dreams, and it creates jobs and prosperity for our communities. But Congress must catch up. Our outdated federal laws on cannabis are not only unjust, they also prevent countless businesses and entrepreneurs from reaching their full potential. That's why last year I was proud to work with my colleagues, Democrat and Republican alike, on the bipartisan Safe Banking Plus, so businesses that operate in states with legal cannabis can access critical banking infrastructure. It's not fair to force these growing businesses to operate in all cash. It exposes them to too many risks and stifles their opportunities to grow. Congress should be in the business of promoting entrepreneurs, promoting job growth, not holding them back. And of course, I made it one of my top priorities that not just to do the banking bill, to safe banking, but to do Safe Banking Plus and include important criminal justice reforms, including expunging criminal records for certain low-level marijuana offenses. While I'm disappointed that we ran into opposition at the last minute, we were close last year, as you know. Last year's effort made one thing clear. There is no question cannabis reform is a growing bipartisan priority in the Senate. And we're working in a bipartisan way. The people who are strong advocates of safe banking and the people who are strong advocates of criminal justice reform when it comes to cannabis, we've come together to pass a bill that can produce a strong majority in the Senate. Because putting bills in, which we want to do, isn't as good as passing legislation that actually makes things happen. So I want to thank everyone who's worked on this legislation from both sides of the aisle, including Senators Merkley and Brown, Dane, Sullivan, Paul. Now, there were other ways we made progress on cannabis policy last year, small but significant. For instance, last year the Senate unanimously passed the Medical Marijuana and Cannabis Research Expansion Act, which is now the law of the land. I'm sure many of you know someone who struggles with conditions like Parkinson's, my mom, or epilepsy, or post-traumatic stress, or any number of other ailments. Cannabis holds promising new options for managing these diseases, but we must find the research. That's why getting this bill passed unanimously was important, and I want to thank Senators Schatz and Grassley for their work. And of course, while we're working to pass Safe Banking Plus, I still firmly believe that the ultimate solution has to be comprehensive cannabis reform. That's why last year I joined with Senators Booker and Chairman Wyden to introduce the Cannabis Administration and Opportunity Act so we can finally remove marijuana from the federal list of controlled substances, so we can expunge the criminal records of so many Americans with low-level marijuana offenses, so we can once and for all close the book on the awful, failed, destructive war on drugs, which really was nothing more than a war on people, especially people of color. At its core, this is about individual freedom. This is about basic fairness. We cannot tolerate any longer the tragedy of a young person getting arrested because they have a small amount of marijuana in their pocket. Because of overcriminalization, these good Americans have a permanent criminal record, preventing them from moving forward in their lives years after the offense was listed. It's outrageous. And the human potential that is lost is something America sorely needs. It undermines our basic sense of our equal opportunity, a cornerstone of the American way of life. I believe that elected representatives have an obligation to ensure the laws of the land are just, that they provide equal opportunity for all people, and that they don't disproportionately target certain Americans more than others. My bill, if passed, would right this deep wrong. In the months ahead, I plan to work with my Senate colleagues to reintroduce this important bill, because it's too important to let up now. We will get past as big and broad a bill as we can, but we know we have to go further, and that's why having this bill as our marker is so important. It's my hope we'll introduce it with even more Democratic support than we had last year. So folks, nothing is going to come easy in an era of divided government when there's such negativity and hostility. But that is no excuse for us in Congress to walk away from this effort. Making change happen in a very significant way, as this bill does, is hard. Changing people's minds about old views is very hard too. But we're making progress, and I know we will get there. That's where all of you come in. We will need you, as we always do, to reach out to members of both parties and both chambers, but especially Republicans, so we can make progress on cannabis reform. It's not going to be easy. Bipartisan won't happen on its own in this era of divided government. But if we keep pushing, I know we'll succeed, because this movement is too strong, and Americans have made their views on this issue very clear. When the history of cannabis reform is written, the heroes will not be politicians. It will be people like you, the change makers, the advocates, the experts, who can inform our work in Congress and help us abandon the outdated views of the past. Until we reach our goal, I promise to be in your corner and work like hell to bring federal cannabis policy into the 21st century. Today's award will motivate me to keep going. So I thank you for your great work, and I want to conclude by telling you a little story about my dad. My grandpa came to America as an immigrant. And at 6 years old, he was supposed to be raised by an uncle. His parents didn't come. But the uncle was a ne'er-do-well, so Grandpa was a street urchin. He slept in doorways, he stole apples from the push carts, he didn't go to school, he had to teach himself to read and write as an adult. But when he was 14, it was pouring rain. He was on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. He saw everyone going into this building. And he figured, oh, I'll go in and get dry. They're not charging admission. The building was the Labor Temple. It was built by the unions to teach the poor immigrants about the labor movement. They had three great speakers, the great orators of their day, Eugene V. Debs and Will and Ariel Durant. Grandpa stayed for 6 hours, was struck as a thunderbolt, became a union organizer, ended up in Utica, New York. He was one of the founders of the Paper Workers Union. He worked in the paper mills there. So now we'll get to my dad and the point of the story. My dad enlisted. He was raised in Utica. Pearl Harbor occurred. He enlisted. He was a patriot. They gave him a test. He scored very high. So they gave him top secret clearance and they taught him radar. Radar was just being perfected. And its main mission, of course, was to see airplanes. But a secondary mission was to see mountains, because the Allies were flying over the Himalaya mountains. And the mountains were enshrouded in clouds, and the Japanese fighter planes, called Japanese Zeros, chased these planes in these big, awkward C-45, C-47 freighter planes into the mountains. It was very perilous. Dad flew 20 missions. He helped perfect radar, saved thousands of lives, was sort of a hero. But World War II ended. Grandpa had lost his job. They weren't having union organizers, and bought a little exterminating business in Brooklyn. But Grandpa was an idealist. He'd go into people's homes, they were poor, he'd exterminate, and he said, you shouldn't have rats and roaches, I know you're poor, pay me when you can. He taught the three workers in his business how to form a union and ask him for more money. He's the first boss to help form a union. But in any case, my dad gets back from World War II, the family's starving. So my dad has to go into this junkie business and works in it for 45 years. He hated it, but he never complained. He never even resented or uttered words of resentment against people who were given a better break than him. The only good news is at 68, he retired. He and my mom had 30 good years together. But you know, for those of you who have lost parents you're close to, you'll know what I mean. He's still here, standing right next to me. And he taught me two values above all. Always help people who need help. That's a noble thing to do. And second, if you're doing something important, look in your heart. Make sure it's the right thing to do. And persist and persist and persist, and God will reward you and you will succeed. That's been the story of my life, and that's been your story. We are going to persist and persist and persist because we know we're doing the right thing, and we will not give up till we succeed and decriminalize and legalize marijuana nationwide. Thank you. God bless you. Keep up the fight. We will win.
Please give it up one more time as he leaves the room back to the floor of the United States Senate, of which he is the majority leader, Chuck Schumer.